Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lynn McCormick. I'm the Director of Creative Placemaking for National LISC, Local Initiative Support Corporation. We're thrilled today to be presenting our second webinar in the series, How to Do Creative Placemaking, Digging Deep Community Engagement Methods and Techniques. Before we get going, I want to just acknowledge some folks. The LISC Institute, which is our partner in this presentation. Amani Darden is on the phone with us from the LISC Institute. I want to thank the National Endowment for the Arts for supporting this project and being on the call with us today. Jen Hughes, the Director of the Design Division, is also joining us listening in, but Catherine Bray-Simons will be presenting in a little bit. I want to thank our other supporters, the Kresge Foundation. This initiative is part of a technical assistance program that the Kresge Foundation and the NEA supported over the last 2 years, and we were just thrilled to be able to work with Kresge on this project. I also want to recognize PolicyLink, a partner in the TA program who really helped us think about the framework and analyzing the work that we were doing, and Americans for the Arts, particularly Barbara Schaefer-Bacon, who worked with us last year on a curriculum that we're using pieces of today. And before we get into things, I just want to talk a little bit about housekeeping. Those of you who joined us last time, we apologize for all the technical gaps we had. We've changed the format this time around. We're not going to be using video at all. So you'll hear our voices and see our pictures, but not see us on the screen. Hopefully you can all hear us right now. If you've called in, that's a great way to listen in, but you can also use the audio setting on the WebEx platform. And I think so hopefully you've all figured that out. We're going to be taking questions as the presentation is given. So you can type questions in that little Q&A box at the bottom of your right-hand side of your screen as you're going. And Rebecca Chan, who's my partner at LISC, will be fielding those questions, and we'll have some time at the end to answer them. Just like last time, please direct the question to a specific panelist. So without further ado, I'm going to get started by introducing Catherine Bray-Simons, who will be just talking a little bit about the NEA's program. And then after she speaks, I'll do a part of the presentation that is the more formal part around methodologies. And then we're really excited to dig into it with FORKLIFT Dance Company and the City of Austin, who will present on their work that they've been doing in Austin, Texas. So without further ado, Catherine Bray-Simons.
Thanks so much, Lynn, and really sincere thanks to all of you out there who are joining us today for this session. I'm just going to kick us off quickly by providing a little bit of background context. So the National Endowment for the Arts is, of course, a federal agency, and our town is one of several competitive grant programs we offer. And our town responds to this reality, right, that artists, designers, and cultural organizations really do have so much to offer local communities who are facing really challenging and often long-standing social or economic issues or shortcomings of the built environment. And yet arts and culture is largely not widely recognized as a tool, right, or a source for innovative solutions in addressing these kinds of issues. So through our town grants, the NEA is supporting local communities in testing the inclusion of arts and culture in cross-sectoral community development strategies, bringing arts and artists and cultural organizations in to work right alongside players you might more typically expect to find as part of these processes, like people involved with community development, economic development, or education issues, dealing with environmental sustainability and energy questions, folks who are working on problems around health and public health, access to housing, public safety, transportation, workforce development, really the list goes on. So sort of this type of approach that really intentionally includes arts among these other sectors in the course of community development work is what we here at the NEA think of when we think of successful creative placemaking projects. So here's a look at the Our Town program's theory of change. And moving from right to left, you'll see that we're really striving toward a national tipping point, right, where the inclusion of arts and culture-based strategies is understood as just a normal, everyday part of what we as citizens expect from high-quality community development practice. And part of how we here at the NEA think that we will get there as a nation is by, through funding, helping to support catalytic local projects that will help kind of build a proof of concept for creative placemaking approaches in those places. But in addition to making funding awards, we're also working to build technical assistance resources like this webinar series that can help foster peer exchange and foster ground-up learning to really help guide folks through what we know can be really complex work, right? Partners involved in these projects will often find themselves in sort of uncharted territory. And so we want to deliver resources that can help practitioners navigate those challenges. And I just want to give one final thought with regard to today's topic around community engagement. So this is a really core dimension of creative placemaking projects, and you know, it's often what can distinguish some of the most successful projects that we fund. Certainly, you know, when we were reviewing applications to the Our Town program, panelists really care about this piece and look carefully at it. So in our theory of change, you'll see that expressed here on the far left in that local input bubble, the blue one at the top. You'll see that we have community buy-in as a kind of key ingredient right there alongside money and partnerships. It's a foundational piece. And if you're not sure how you're going to approach generating buy-in from your stakeholders and from the community that you're aiming to serve, it might be that you're really not ready to embark on this project. It's just something you've got to kind of have a handle on and the strategy for from the start. Because ultimately, these are projects that happen with community. They're driven by community. They don't happen to communities. So with that, I'm going to pass this back to Lynn, who's going to sort of further unpack this concept for us. So back to you, Lynn.
Thanks, Catherine. So let's see. So I am going to go through these slides rather quickly. They will be available for you to download and use for presentations at the local level, or to share with others, or this webinar is being recorded and can be re-accessed. So I want to get to the storytelling that Allison and her team are going to do, because I think that they really, the work that they're doing in Austin really illustrates a lot of these points. So if I sound like I'm going too fast, I apologize, but I want to be able to give them enough time to really talk through their projects. So, so creative research is what we are calling sort of the big overall arching kind of bucket where community engagement, community-based design, community-driven design sort of lives. And we like to think about this, as Catherine was just saying, that it's really the means to the end of your project. So as you're doing this community engagement, this community discovery process, it really becomes the creative placemaking itself. So this is really a critical piece of the project that needs to be really thought through, and really a lot of time needs to be spent on it. When we look at the community engagement spectrum, we think of different ways of engaging community. First, we think of the sort of informed process. The informed process really just provides residents with information and assists them in understanding problems and alternatives or solutions. So if you think, for example, of a public planning meeting where a project may be being presented to the public for feedback, for comment, that's sort of the informed category of community engagement. That can then move into the feedback category, which I just mentioned already, but to obtain feedback and analysis and alternatives, or change decisions based on feedback given. we like to really think about creative placemaking as utilizing the next three, though, much more in a much more powerful way by starting by involving residents. So working directly with residents and consistently considering their concerns and aspirations, setting up processes that allow them to give input before decisions are made, setting different ways and methodologies for involving the public. So it could be, we're going to talk about some of those things in the next few slides, but it could be anything from having focus groups to having co-design workshops to design charrettes or World Cafe problem-solving sessions. That also leads into the collaborate kind of spectrum of community engagement, digging deep into partnering with residents in decision-making and including identifications of solutions, allowing residents to actually call out what the problems are in the neighborhood or the place that you're working in, or the stakeholders that are going to be benefiting or not benefiting from the project that you're doing, hopefully benefiting. And then the final step really is empowering and giving ownership of the project over to the community, the residents, the business people, the folks that are directly impacted by the work that's going on, and really having them lead the solution-based efforts. So how do we get there? Sorry, I forgot the slide was coming. So we get there by going back to where we started in the last webinar. We gather everyone. We really think about the value that we have at the table and why we're there and what we want to be doing with all of our partners and imagining the outcomes, but then discovering and sharing with the community so that they move into the take action with us, and then the project continues. But so we're on this continuum of the spiral. We're really today talking about the discover and the share section. So how do we go through the steps of discovery? How do we really figure out what the community needs? And so we want to surface what we know already. We want to determine what we need to know. Then we want to gather that information, organize and analyze and synthesize the findings, and then tell the story with the community, all with the community and using creative engagement techniques. This is a slide of Art at Work in Portland, Maine. Artist Marty Pottinger has been working really closely there with the police department for years, and she's very much using this kind of steps of discovery and engagement. One of the things we want to do first is think about what existing information already is available. So folks can go to their city planning department, their housing department, their arts and culture divisions, state archives, all these different places where we can get these planning documents that have already happened. And there's already a lot of economic and demographic information that's been collected, so that can be utilized in your thinking. You can find this existing information again in business improvement districts, housing authorities, through social service organizations. Everyone's got reports, everyone's got data. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel. Go to your local CDCs, your community foundations, your neighborhood councils. Everyone's got data that they can share. You want to think about a network map. In a project, you're sort of the middle bubble. The name of your project is the middle bubble. All the partners that are coming together are in that sort of green bubble on the outside of the middle bubble. And then each of these organizations has access to different communities and different organizations, different types of relationships. So, the housing authority has direct relationships with the residents. It may have a relationship with community organizers and other housing producers. Social service agencies, the service providers will have access to all the different social service agencies, and so on and so on. So what do folks on the core team already know, and what do they need to learn, and what, through this relationship network mapping, can they uncover? And who in this community and in this network has the power, who makes the decisions, and then how do you think about really creating a power map that is equity driven? How do we acknowledge that? How do we think through who may be assumed to have more power than others, and then really hold that in the project work and think that through and try to break down those assumptions. Another way to find out what's going on around your project is through asset mapping. We could do a whole entire webinar on asset mapping and cultural asset mapping, but basically you use asset mapping to identify favorite places and problem areas, gathering places, arts and cultural resources, and artists and creative workers. And that's usually what we use asset mapping for, cultural asset mapping, to look at all these different kinds of community assets and think through where people are getting this access to these things. And that can include things that you wouldn't be thinking about too, like local heroes and leaders and activists. It could be that people get their culture at someone's church in a church basement or in someone's kitchen making certain kinds of food. So don't underplay those sort of culture bearers and the local folks that are really bringing culture to neighborhoods. People count as community assets as well as things. And then we want to make sure that we're thinking about the roles artists can play in this work, not just as makers, but as facilitators. How can artists help bring community members together to really think through problems and solve issues? Artists are generally trained as problem solvers and creative thinkers, and oftentimes will come up with really creative solutions to thinking through or analyzing a problem. They're also great as organizers, community-based organizers. We've had a lot of artists working in neighborhood market areas as community organizers, building events, creating relationships between business and artists and residents. They ask questions and listen deeply for the most part, and really can bring fresh eyes to community work. I know a lot of folks on this call are artists themselves or coming from arts organizations. So you all know that you can be part of a community and really see it from a different perspective than others. What we've found is that in the community development world, bringing artists into our work has allowed for an asset-based approach to solving problems, which is really important because our sector tends to be very problem-based, sort of looking for the things that need to be fixed. And when we bring arts and culture into the mix, we're really thinking about what assets we already have and how those assets can be brought to bear in solving issues, and it really changes things up. When we talk about engaging community, we really need to think about different ways to do that. And so many of you will be familiar with these methodologies, interviews being used out in the community, asking people not to come to you, but having your interview team go to them. That always allows folks to really be able to participate at a higher level, so think about that a little bit. This is a project in Philadelphia for meditation on memory, and it was a visual mapping exercise of the Fair Hill community that was used, that an artist did storytelling work to visually map the neighborhood. Community conversations and focus groups are also obviously a great way to bring people together. And when you're doing those kinds of things, it's really important to provide hospitality, to allow at least an hour and a half, and to really be clear about what you're trying to accomplish in those meetings. And then it's really important to report back out those kinds of meetings to the community and the folks who participated. Allison and her team are going to talk a lot about the different methodologies and the way that they work, so I won't go too much more into that. And then obviously using social media and polls and surveys. These are ways to reach a lot of people, to get a lot of information. So you do the community focus groups, you do the interviews, you do the door knocking, the one-on-one conversations. But then if you want to reach a lot of people, sending out polls and surveys and asking partners to then send those polls and surveys again for you, you can actually get a lot of information back from those kinds of things. We did a chain effect for a cultural plan that I worked on a while back, and we ended up with over like 1,000 responses because we asked our partners and our stakeholders to send them out and send them out and send them out. So that's just a great way to get a lot of information easily, as you all know. But most importantly, as you're doing these different processes and engaging the community and drawing them into the work and putting them in the driver's seat in the work, it's really important to stop at some point along the way and do a process check. Are you really getting the participation that you want, that you know you need? Are you reflecting the demographics of the neighborhood? If you're not, you need to think about how you're going to get that. Maybe doing a community gathering doesn't work. Maybe you need to go do the interviews. Maybe you need to train a core of people to do interviews in the neighborhood, really making sure that you're reaching all the folks that need to be included and listening to the issues that are being surfaced and not just writing them down on a piece of paper, but really looking at them and asking the community to identify the ones that are the most important. This is also an opportunity to think about what you need to change in terms of the way you're doing the work and how you're doing the project. Are there additional resources that are coming up that you need? Are you missing something? Do you need more knowledge and expertise? What cultural opportunities are missing after you've looked through the assessments? And, what should stay the same and what should be changed in our work? One of the great things about the creative placemaking work and the NEA Art Town program is that there's a real understanding that sometimes things need to change, and funders will work with you to understand those changes. And if you can present a clear understanding of why and how the community has sort of decided and driven the work into a different direction, folks are really happy to see those shifts happen if that's what's right for the community. So don't be afraid of asking for those kinds of things in your work. And then I think I talked about this enough already, but just refining the project concept. So incorporating that community feedback, refining or confirm the work that you're doing, and again, remembering that the project itself may not be as important as the community engagement process. So these are all just the things that you should be thinking about as you're doing these community outreach and engagement. And then don't forget at the end to reflect and celebrate. Keep a record of the work, keep a record of the engagements, take time at a meeting to really say thank you. And then in doing this and being inclusive and in encouraging people to be participants and active makers in the work, you're able to cultivate these long-lasting relationships. And I think that's part of one of the things that, as we put this technical assistance program together with the NEA and Kresge, we really wanted to see these projects, after they were over, sustaining relationships that could move forward so that they're strong and that they're deep, and that all the setting of the table and all the trust building that you do at the beginning, and then all of this sort of reflection and celebration together helps to continue these relationships going forward so more work can happen in the community. And now we're going to just switch over to our local presenters, and I'm going to switch back to Catherine, and she is going to introduce our FORKLIFT team in the city of Austin.
So this is so extra special that we get to hear from Allison and Chrissy at FORKLIFT DanceWorks in Austin, and also from Paul Slutz, who's with the City Department of Parks and Recreation, because you really embody, in co-presenting this spirit of partnership and really sincere, genuine collaboration that we're really looking to support in our town. So this is just fantastic to hear from all of you. I'll introduce our panelists. So as founder and artistic director of FORKLIFT DanceWorks, Allison Orr creates dances that showcase the beauty and virtuosity in the practiced, habitual movement of labor and everyday life. Over the past 20 years, Allison has honed a methodology of ethnographic choreography that engages community members as co-authors and performers in the creation of large-scale civic spectacles. Named Best Choreographer of 2016, 2017, and 2018 by the Austin Chronicle, Allison was also a 2018 United States Artist Fellow. Welcome, Allison. And we're also joined by Chrissy Marty. She engages working people in creating dances that ask audiences to reconsider their relationship to labor and laboring bodies. Chrissy directed Resource, a collaboration with the employees of Goodwill Resource Center, and she has also co-directed performances including Bartholomew Swims, Power Up, Play Ball Downfield, Afoot, a marching band extravaganza, and The Trees of Govali. She'll correct me. Her choreography has been performed at the Kennedy Center, Stratford Circus in London, and at Jacob's Pillow Dance Festival. Welcome to you also, Chrissy. And finally, Paul Slutz is Aquatic Maintenance Supervisor for the Austin Parks and Recreation Aquatics Division. He started working as a pool attendant at the age of 13 and has worked in aquatics ever since. He has collaborated on My Park, My Pool, My City from its start and performed in Bartholomew Swims in 2017, and he also performed in Dove Springs Swims in 2018. Welcome, Paul. Thanks again to you all for joining us, and we're just thrilled to hear from you.
Thank you so much. We're so happy to be here. Thank you all for joining us. So I'm Allison Ward. I'm going to go ahead and get started. So for over 20 years, FORKLIFT DanceWorks has been creating dances with people who you don't often think of as dancers. Past projects have included sanitation workers, power linemen, and urban forestry employees. Through our dances, we highlight the often overlooked choreography of labor that keeps our city moving. We make our dances by embedding ourselves within communities and building trusting relationships. And we didn't start out thinking of our work as creative placemaking, but we have realized that is what we do. For by activating communities through a creative process, we are enlivening the spaces in which our collaborators live and work. So our partnerships with city employees have really led us to consider who they are serving and where they are working. And also through the years, we have seen that it is really after the performance that people are most eager to be in dialogue, extend networks, and do hard work together. So now we really think of our performances as the middle of a process rather than the end or a culmination. So in 2015, the then director of Parks and Rec came to us after witnessing our project with urban forestry, the trees of Go Valley, and literally asked us, would you please do pools next? That's exactly what she said. Aquatics was in crisis. Our city pool system was crumbling due to age and lack of funding support. Even though Parks and Rec was in the middle of a master planning process for pools, there was not wide community understanding of the key problems, much less community support or will to fix them. So bearing all of these ideas in mind, we designed My Park, My Pool, My City. We intentionally created it as a multi-year project, and with it, we're really seeking to engage city employees and neighborhood residents in collaborative art making and civic dialogue. So working with Aquatics, we've designed the project to specifically engage 3 East Austin neighborhoods. In 2017, we premiered our first dance at Bartholomew Pool, telling the story of the infrastructure crisis at the site of our city's newest renovated pool. In 2018, we presented our second dance with the Dove Springs community, focusing on the story of the pool user and incorporating over 50 neighborhood residents in the show. And then this July, we will premiere our final performance in the Gibbons neighborhood. Built in 1958, this pool has a long history and is slated for major renovations. Lastly, in our last election, City of Austin voters passed the largest bond allocation for aquatics ever in our city's history. So we started this project with the goal to connect arts to city policy, and we are so excited that this bond passed with 81% of the vote. And we think we might have just a tiny bit to do with that, we hope. So today we're here to talk to you about our methods of community engagement. Honestly, we don't really like the word community engagement much because it implies that working with community can be an extra or an add-on to a project. Instead, we really like to use the word collaboration, because collaborating with communities is central to all we do. It's how we make our work. In the last webinar, we know you all discussed reciprocity, and this value is critical to our approach. We're constantly, we like to say, listening for need. What are the community's key needs and goals, and how can we be sure our work is addressing those? I'd like now to bring on Chrissy Marty, Associate Artistic Director. She's going to talk more about our specific strategies around building relationship and collaborating with communities.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Allison. So our first step in our process is really to get curious. So whether we're talking with kind of management to get buy-in for a project, or whether we're actually talking with workers, who are doing the day-to-day work to get their buy-in on a project, we really want to understand how we can help them. What are their key needs? So, for example, when we were first meeting with Parks and Rec leaders, we said, in 5 years, what do you want to be different? This project is over, what's changed? And your kind of wildest dreams, what would happen? And they said, we really want Austinites to better understand the issues of aquatics. And they had just done this master plan. People had a lot of community engagement and had said, Austin doesn't have enough money to fix all these pools. So yes, close some pools, but don't close mine. So they really wanted citizens to have an understanding of the system and that there were citywide needs for aquatics, which we think the bonds showed that. They did understand that. So that's sort of our first step, is to really get curious. And yes, we're looking at demographic information and other research, but listening is a big part of our work. Our second step is actually to get to work. A lot of the work we do
is job shadowing. And here is a picture of me with Jonathan Tapscott, one of the aquatics maintenance staff, and he were taping a pool in preparation for it to be painted. So we literally go to where the community is. In this case, some of our community was aquatic staff. So we showed up at the job. We showed up early when they get to work. I think y'all start at like 6:30.
Yes.
And we meet people where they are, and then we work alongside. So it's really important to actually work. We're proving ourselves. We're getting kind of an embodied knowledge of what the job is, and we're also learning community values, immersing ourselves in that community, learning vocabulary and ways of working, and we're really building our observations and understanding of the community, and in this case, the work. So at Aquatics, we job shadowed with maintenance staff and lifeguards. So I'd like to introduce you to Paul Slutz, our maintenance supervisor. Here you are, Paul, doing a chemical test.
Yeah, that's some collaboration right there.
And you're showing 2 teams, 2 lifeguards in training, kind of what it takes, what a chemical test is and how you do it. So what was it like when we came and job shadowed?
Well, when you first came in, I was, kind of skeptical at first as to what your motives were and stuff, but I'll talk about that here in just a second. So what I did is I actually vetted you guys. I worked on the trees of Bill Valley with our forestry department, so I walked across the office park and talked to them about y'all and had to, do my background and, realized that, hey, everything's going to be okay, that you guys are professionals and, are awesome.
They gave you some good advice, though?
They sure did. They sure did.
And what was it like to have an outsider come in and be part of the job?
Well, so much of what we do is behind the scenes that, it was really refreshing to have somebody come in. And it kind of gave us a chance to showcase what we do, and we knew that y'all were awesome like that. So.
Mm-hmm. And did it help that we actually worked alongside you in the crews?
Yeah, that really, that was key to gaining respect from our crew and to get them to have buy-in also, as well as myself, because you guys actually did what we did, and you worked with us alongside us. So.
Yeah, I remember you said you're easy to, it was impressive, but you're easy to impress. It's harder to impress your crew.
Exactly. You had to get them behind you, and that's exactly what you did by doing that.
Mm-hmm. What got you hooked? What really made you trust, this kind of a art project?
Well, like we said, you job shadowed us, so we got to know you. And then hearing the motives that you had, that you were there to help the community, that explained a lot to us. We don't do this really for the money, we do it for the community. We want to have we want to give everybody the chance to swim in the city of Austin. And so we realized quickly that FORKLIFT had the same goals and values that we do here in the city of Austin.
Sweet. Well, part of, I think, the way we got to figure that out is we have kind of key interview questions that we ask continually, which is really, what do you love about your job? Or if we're talking to neighbors or other people in the place, what do you love about this place? What's hard about your job, or what's challenging about this place? How did you get into this work or this job, and what brought you here? A little bit. So, and then I think one of our really, the last question that's really important to us, because it gets people thinking about how to articulate, in a way, the most meaningful things they want to communicate is, what do you want people to know about your job? So this really prepares us to communicate an idea, to start making art in a way, to communicate a message and what's most important. This is a slide of some of the community members that were in the show, and the first row is a group of teens. The second row is actually a council member, Delia Garza, and then Travis County Commissioner George Morales in Precinct 2. And then behind you see a police officer and some other community leaders that are organizers and Parks and Rec staff. So our next kind of step is really hanging out. And when we say hanging out, it's really showing up to listen and really being present with people without an agenda. So we're going to things that the community values. We're showing up. We're showing interest. We're learning about what's important to them. And so we find a lot of different ways to be in the community, and I think, as Lynn mentioned earlier, to really meet them where they are, to go to them. So we might be at the barber shop or at a taco joint. You'll continue to hear food is very important to us. Neighborhood meetings, school meetings. We're looking for formal and informal gatherings, park cleanups. We'll go to churches, holiday meals and parties and events for the community. We met some neighborhood leaders at the Easter egg hunt this year at the park. And, we like to say we never miss a meal. We've been known to hit 2 Thanksgiving meals across town in the same day. So, but we're really, but by doing that, we're also going to get the community's help to identify who the leaders are. There are certainly formal leaders in a community, and there's informal leaders. And so we're trying to figure out whose trust do we need to earn, who do we need to listen to so the project will serve the neighborhood's needs, and who are the gatekeepers, who are the connectors, who to talk to and in what order. And there's so much to learn about a community, its history, its context, its people, and all of this starts to become information for artistic research. We also engaged a group of East Austin advocates and aquatics advocates, neighborhood leaders, aquatics advocates, to form a citizens advisory committee. We realized taking on a 3-year project in 3 different neighborhoods, it was going to be very ambitious, and that we had gaps in our knowledge and experience. So we invited these folks to to work with us and advise us and think about the project. So it was really helping us enter into the neighborhoods with integrity and connection, to function as kind of a focus group and to help promote the project, and also really did a lot of network mapping for us, this really activated group of people. And then I think our main thing is to really hang out at the main place, where there was a rec center that had a lot of involvement and participation. So we spent a lot of time at the rec center and got to know seniors in a senior program at the rec center. And then, of course, we spent a lot of time at the pool. And we found popsicles were a really important strategy in getting people to listen to what we were doing and even help us. So we have what we call pool parties to spread the word about what we were doing, and recruit participants, and even to try out choreographic ideas, whether we were jumping, diving, or swimming in the pool. So that was a way to kind of gather people and start to talk about what we're up to. We hired teams to help us with the show. They did research and helped promote the project. They were also in the show. They invited friends. They helped lead block walking, where we went door to door to share information about the show, available swim lessons at the pool, and even registered voters. We also did promotion with them, looking at a bilingual local radio show, being on Telemundo, postering in English and Spanish, and in addition doing, we got the school district to do robocalls over the summer, which was pretty amazing. And it was really important for this show to be bilingual. It's a very mixed and diverse neighborhood, but largely Latino and Spanish speaking. So, and we also wanted a lot of ways for people to be in the show. So this we called the Paseo, where people could just show up and walk around the pool at the very beginning as kind of our welcome and hello. And that was how they were able to engage in the performance. They just showed up and did it. It was one role. And then we had other roles for people to be more involved. So I wanted to ask you, Paul, what was it like for you to engage in the community in these different ways from your regular job as aquatics?
It was great. It was fantastic. I tell you what, I've become friends with several of the activists that I've met through the show. And, instead of being afraid of their phone calls, now we're able to have discussions and find out what they really need for their pool, what they want. So I got to know them. And in turn, they got to know us, and they got to find out that we actually care about the pools. We actually care about the community that we serve, that we're there to help them. And so it was a full circle, we got to know them, they got to know us. Like you said in the beginning, somebody introduced me and said that I've been doing this since I was 13. And so I spent my life's work doing this. And it's really wonderful to know that the community really cares about the swimming pools in Austin, Texas.
Great. So we're going to just talk for a few minutes about the actual process of making the dances, which is really where the deepest relationships are built and really where the magic happens. And what's great for us as choreographers is that we have this amazing opportunity to utilize a creative process that has a deadline, that has a performance at the end. And so that's really important, as it gives us a common goal for all of us to work towards. It also gives us an audience, which allows the community members like aquatic staff and the neighborhood residents who participate a chance to share their stories and really be witnessed. So here are Chrissy and I at the pool with 3 high school students who are doing lifeguard training along with a aquatic supervisor, and we are learning lifeguard drills. So we continue that job shadowing process really through the dance making, where we ask the experts, in this case the lifeguards, to teach us how to do their work, to learn it so that we know how to create a dance with them. And that really is one of our tricks about how we make the work, is we really go to the experts and we ask the question, how might you make a dance about your job? So here's Paul with Jonathan Tapscott and Juan Hernandez in a section of the choreography in our first dance, Bartholomew Swims, doing a choreographed chemical test. And this is, again, a great example where we needed to tell the story of the place and the story of this pool. So who do we ask to help us figure that out? Well, the experts, and this is Paul Tapel, who better to know what work happens at that pool and how we might show it. I think the other thing to know that's really important about the process of making is that everyone is paid, that we pay all the artists, community members, and city staff. It's something we negotiate with the city department from the get-go, is that staff like Paul, Tap, and Juan are paid to participate by the department to be in the show and in rehearsals with us, and then we ourselves pay community members too. And then we feed everybody too, which is really important. I know Lynn mentioned hospitality. You can't have enough food, and that's a big part of what we're providing during, in making the dance and performing it. So what was great about this second summer is that Paul, here with Alan, who was in the show this time, came with ideas about what they wanted to see happen at the pool with their choreography. So Christy and I, ultimately, when you ask the question to people, how do you make a dance here, and they get the confidence, their imagination begins, then you can't even stop them from bringing up ideas. So Paul and Alan really devised this section. And so it was really fun to see that happen in our second year together. So Paul, question for you, in terms of the impact of the process. Now that you've worked with us for 2 years, what is it like for you to drive up to these pools, to pull up to these pools where you've performed?
Wow. When I pull up to Bartholomew and Dove Springs, I don't just see a pool or something that I need to fix. I see a community. I see Rosie. I see Dwayne. I see Pam. I see Arlene. I see the kids at the rec center and Joe and his kids. I think of people. I don't just think of a pool anymore. I see the community.
That's great. And other positive outcomes, Paul?
You mentioned before that the budget, but I think that this whole project, it brought attention and attention to the cost that it costs to maintain pools and to maintain the infrastructure. And so that's been fantastic. I think it helped increase our budget. I really do.
Great.
And do you feel like what did it do for you and your role in the department?
Oh, yeah. It's really given me some credibility. I think it's got me invited to some meetings that maybe I wouldn't have been invited to. People are valuing our opinion, not just my opinion, but the opinion of our maintenance team and our staff.
So we often think about the performance, as Allison mentioned, is kind of the middle of a process. So when the show is over, it's just kind of another phase of the project. And so we're looking at building relationships through the performance and then to continue dialogue. So we definitely do a lot of surveys and interviews around reflection about the show. We host events and invite the public to continue talking about an issue. And I think what's really amazing, because we're working, in our own community, we've been able to maintain relationships, for up to 10 or more, 20, almost now 20 years.
20 years, yeah.
Going back and talking to people about projects and the impacts of it, and continuing, relationships, even if it's with a smaller number of staff or whatever, but we're still maintaining those connections. So we get to go back and visit the place and invite community members to come to our other events or other projects, and so we've just kind of keep building this network. So yeah, we have a little bit of advice that we want to share, which is really our work in creative placemaking and collaborative art making is really built on a tradition of community-based work. So what we would want to say is, learn, study, find mentors, find people who are doing this, find partners that you trust, and hang on to them. We are certainly building on what our mentors figured out and taught us. And Allison and I both got to work at the Liz Lerman Dance Exchange and an amazing community of artists, including Celeste Miller. We definitely count Marty Pottinger as a mentor, Jowly Zolar and Urban Bushwomen, and Stephanie McGee and her work at Junebug Productions, and have a lot of affiliations with Alternate Roots. And I think all of the work of those artists and that kind of, and many, many more, kind of the cohort of community-based artists have really influenced and laid the groundwork, I think, for what we're doing now.
And I think lastly, we'd just say that, there isn't one solution. It's multi-pronged. We really relearned that again this past summer, working with over 50 community members, or many, many more in the Dove Springs Project, but there's just not one way to connect with the community. We throw a wide net, and it takes a long time. Our projects always take more than a year, but I would say that we like to say it's not quick, it's not cheap. So be prepared to commit and be prepared to fundraise for the cost of really doing something long term. I also like to quote Marty Pottinger that everyone wants to do great things. And so keep the art bar high, make excellent work, and we push ourselves and our collaborators to really make great art, and that's so important for all of us. And then I think lastly, just that it's all, again, comes back to listening, practice listening. We like to say we show up and shut up and really notice the expertise that's in the community around us.
I think one last idea is really to be open. I think every project we go into, I have some kind of assumption, whether it's about the place or the work or the people, and that assumption is always changed. Whether it's sort of like I go in with a black and white sketch and it gets colored in, or there's something I don't see, but there's always information and kind of new things I learn. So I think going in, being curious, being open, authentic, and ready to kind of change my own thinking is really important.
So I think we're going to turn it over now to questions and answers for Paul, Chrissy, and myself.
Yeah, and we're going to start with a question from Catherine.
Hey, Catherine from the National Endowment for the Arts here, with a question for the FORKLIFT folks, and maybe Paul, if you could weigh in too, that would be awesome.
Okay.
I want to point out that it really, from my perspective, it seems like it is the community engagement piece that allowed this amazing collaborative work of art to be ultimately produced. And actually, as you said, that was sort of almost the middle of your story arc, and then the story continues with your ongoing relationship with these communities and with the Parks and Recreation Department aquatics folks. So I just sort of wondered if you could speak to kind of from like a practical, maybe almost administrative perspective, what like the time span of the community engagement piece was leading up to the performance, and sort of like the staff resources and other kinds of resources that are required to pull off this really high quality engagement process. And Paul, if you want to weigh in on that too, that'd be great to hear. I think just to give people a really perspective on, the process relative to the quote unquote product, as it were, and the way that you're allocating resources sort of respectively between those two phases, if you wanted to think about it that way.
Great. Well, I'll start, and Chrissy and Paul will chime in. So really, this project began long before 2017. It really began with the Trees of Go Valley and working with PARD there and having those relationships and then being invited to design something together. And so it was back in maybe 14 or 15 that I was sitting down with the director of PARD saying, what long-term project might we try together? And then she invited us. Now, Aquatics didn't invite us. She then gave us to Aquatics. So it was, we actually wrote the Our Town grant, and I think we began in 2015 writing that. That was awarded in 16. But our planning was really started in 15, 16 to then produce our first performance in 17. So it was easily, I would say, a 2-year planning process. And then once we really get into production, I would say Chrissy and I are full-time on the project. It's hard to, I would say a good 6 months. We're working a year out from performance easily with our team, but then the cavalry kind of comes to town. We have a bunch of interns and other support staff that come in about 3 months before the show, and then it's really all hands on deck that time.
Probably what starts with about maybe 4 or 5 of us on the project ends up being about 20 artists that are kind of either musicians or lighting or our sort of rehearsal support staff, and like all the performers all the people you saw in that picture are mostly cast. The cast is all community members and PARD staff. So yeah, that's
what kind of time did it take on your end, Paul?
On our end, well, you have to be flexible on our end. So, and we were, because we had the support of our top level administrators. So that really helped out a lot. But yeah, it's it's an hour here, an hour there, and we do some things behind the scenes to make the stage, the pool, ready for presentation.
Leading up to the show, Paul, like the 2 weeks up to the show, it's probably, I would say the week of the show, it's probably about 20 hours. Extra.
You're looking at a lot of practice time.
Yeah.
5 hours a day for 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
And then you have to have your staff out there, and so it is a commitment on our end too. Mm-hmm. But we think it's valued. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Hi, this is Lynn. I've got a couple questions coming in from the audience, so I think if we could jump to those, would be great. We've had a few questions about community collaboration and programming. So one of the questions is, what community collaboration methods were employed before the programming implementation? For example, was an input process used to determine what kinds of programming would be deployed by the organization? And then another follow-up on the team staff and how that worked out in terms of your prior experience working with them and their long-term plan for participation, your long-term plan for participation with them. Those are 2 questions that just came in. I don't know if there's similar, but.
Yeah, I think as far as input deployed, we spent a lot of time with Parks and Rec and with Aquatics determining what neighborhoods and pools we would work with. We got input from our advisory committee as well, but we really followed, our partners' lead on what pools were important to them and why. Right after the first year, I remember right after our first performances at Bartholomew, we had a meeting at the Aquatics office, Paul, that you were in, and 2 of your colleagues were talking about, well, what story do we want to tell next? We feel like we told the infrastructure story. Now let's tell the story of who uses the pool and why. So I think we really strategized, with our main partners for sure. And then once we got into that neighborhood, we, all of our kind of methods of collaboration, interviewing, hanging out, asking questions, all of that becomes the input that creates the performance and kind of the program. And so literally we will use, we'll record interviews with people and we'll use very, very, very short sound bites, but what we feel is the key, a really key important issue or a key story, we'll use that in the performance. So there's that, some of that input ends up directly into the show, and some of it is more, informs our tone and design decisions and aesthetic choices and structure and things. And then our team staff, we really got to work with teen lifeguards the first year because that's who lifeguards are. And then the second year, we really wanted to hire some neighborhood teams to help, and we will continue that in this next neighborhood, and we're even thinking, we're going to see if we can bring some of those teams from this summer into this new neighborhood. there's transportation considerations and things like that. But we really want to build on those relationships with them.
And it was great to have the teams. So there was just a weekly schedule with them. We had certain staff members who were really focused on kind of designing what they would do with us, and then they did a variety of things in terms of give us advice, direction, social media plan they made, and then they were actually helping to generate the choreography and then help run the show. They were in charge of certain parts of the show, and particularly shepherding community members who showed up or would just, step in for one night. They would have specific jobs around that. So it was a real success for us to have them with us. And we worked with the high schools and the neighborhood leaders to select those teams. We had a short application process. So they did have to jump through some hurdles to be able to, so we knew that their commitment level, that they were in a position to be able to commit what we needed for the summer.
Great. And a follow-up question to that, and I'm going to mix two questions again, like I did last time. One of them is just how do you make these projects happen with a limited budget when you can't provide large stipends to compensate or incentivize participation? I think I'd be curious just to know how, if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about your budget. And then another question about rural areas and finding funding for that for organizations working in rural underfunded areas. I don't know if Catherine might follow up with that at some point as well.
So we began doing projects like this nearly 20 years ago, and the first budget for a project with the fire department was probably not more than $5,000, if that. So of course, our budgets are larger now, and that's taken a lot of work, and it'd be great to have just a webinar on fundraising, because it's a whole separate thing. But I would encourage people to think about, particularly if you're working on a limited budget, about scope and scale. And that, for example, with the fire department, production-wise, that was a show during the day. So I knew I didn't have those lighting costs. The city covered the firefighters' time to participate. This was a marketing and PR event for the fire department, so I was not paying the performers. A typical dance company might have that cost. Now, I was teaching at the community college, and that's how I was funding my time. But the department had resources to bear. For example, they called the Parks and Rec department and got the bleachers to be in kind. So if I'm working closely with a partner and my project is addressing their needs, they are going to have resources to bear to make a project successful. So I would just... Can
I just jump in there too? I'm going to jump in on that just for a sec because when we were getting ready for the call and talking about some of the things before, we talked about the bond passing and how that, with that success, and maybe you could talk a little about that, would then incentivize more city departments to maybe participate in the work.
Well, that would be a bold thing to tell a city department then, that we can help you get a $40 million bond pass for your department. But we have a reputation now. Again, we've been doing this for nearly 20 years. People aren't as scared of it. So that's what I would also say is start slow. And, start slow with what you can really pull off and the relationships you can really manage depending upon the size of your team. But yes, now, Lynn, we have a reputation and people know us and they see the opportunities of what we can do for a department that hasn't always been there. Yeah.
I also want to add that I think we had one project that was kind of looking like a commission a few years ago, and we were like, oh, they're going to pay us this much money to do it, and then they're like, oh, we don't have this much, we have that much, so it was less. And then we were like, oh, we have to go to some more community partners to get money, and it was like, oh, right, that gives us more stakeholders, that gives us more partners, that helps. That's another level of kind of collaboration for different people to bring money. So even though it feels like sometimes a lot of fundraising work or that you're getting stuff from here and there and everywhere, it really helps. I mean, I know with, we pay a small stipend for community folks to work with us, and we feed them, and then we also gave them like a gift card to a local restaurant, and and some of the teens we've figured out, is it appropriate to hand a 13-year-old $500 in cash, even though they put in that time? Probably not. So we're in this neighborhood. Part of the culture of the neighborhood is to pay people in gift cards. So we did some of that. So it was trying to figure out how to compensate people. So. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Can I just say that the social media that FORKLIFT uses is fantastic as a performer group. you know, it really gets the word out. And so radio shows, social media, things that they do.
But to speak to your point, Lynn, I think we offer a marketing opportunity that city departments are looking for, so that you're right, that we do offer, you know, we offer a service. And I think it's important for us as artists to think of that, about how we are offering, you know, we're offering how many media impressions, you know, we know how to make fans. But I think that is something that now when we go to departments, we met with another potential partner yesterday, and we can take to them, well, this is what happened, this is how many articles and hits and things like that happened last time, this could happen for you all. Yes.
Great.
As far as
well, we're getting close to, it's 3 o'clock now, so we have to wrap up. We're really trying to keep these to an hour. We really value everyone's time. And I do want to answer one other question that came in a couple different ways. One, it was about how LISC works, and are there opportunities to get pro bono help from LISC. So what I would say is that we have 34 offices across the country, and those are all in urban areas for the most part. And then we have 75 rural partners and a network of rural CDCs that we work with. And the rural team also is supporting creative placemaking. And I think that many of our local offices have expertise to help you dig into the community engagement, and have done a lot of work with community planning. And so are a resource for you, just as an arts council would be a resource for you in your local community. And just reach out to the folks there. And if any of you have specific cities or places where you're really trying to get in touch with LISC, please feel free to reach out to Rebecca and I directly, and we'll help you make those connections. We have limited funding, but we have a lot of expertise, so we're happy to do that. Catherine, do you have any final thoughts before we sign off?
I just would say that check out the Our Town guidelines at arts.gov. We do fund projects in rural places. I mentioned the statistic in our first webinar, but 20% of projects we funded through Our Town are in rural or tribal reservation contexts. So don't have the misperception that we only fund projects happening in urban places. That's absolutely not true. We fund communities of all sizes all across the U.S. and the territories. To the person asking the rural question. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. And I was just going to say, as you know, sort of national organizations working in the creative placemaking field, for those of you in rural places, there is a lot of thinking and effort going into rural creative placemaking that maybe we should think about. We'll put some of those resources up online as we develop this resource list. But there's a lot of really great work going on in rural creative placemaking. So join us on January 9th, Crafting an Evaluation Plan and Measuring Impact. We have a special guest, Lynn Osgood, who will be joining us on that webinar to really dig into evaluation. I'll be taking a break from doing any presentations, and she'll be the main presenter on that webinar, along with a community organization that's been doing a lot of work measuring impact. We are working on getting all of these things posted in the next week or so. So look for an email coming from our WebEx platform. The FORKLIFT Dance Company also has some videos that we will be posting along with the Cheyenne River Youth Project video from last week, so from last month. So thank you so much for joining us. We hope this was helpful to you, and we look forward to having you join us again in January. Thanks.